on Rocky Top. Tennessee, though, is I feel like they're maybe, kind of clawing their way back to the Vols program we once knew. It's hard not to like who they are. They were really down, and Carolina seemed to get pretty lazy with the basketball, but they held on to get another big victory last night. And now we've got the Asia Wilson Day coming up here in a few days, but a good one on the road, especially only a couple of days rest.
Yeah, kind of a quick turnaround for South Carolina. Obviously with that LSU game getting moved back a day and another ranked matchup for South Carolina, but they found a way to take care of business. They had a pretty sizable lead there, and I think maybe, Tennessee kind of started working their way back into it. But, at the end of the day, South Carolina found a way to get a win and, continue to do what they're doing. And I think, one of the big standouts so far has been Joyce Edwards. I mean, she's been pretty awesome here recently. Yeah. And last night had 18 and 5, 8 of 13 from the field. And for a freshman, they need her to step up big time, especially when Ashlyn Watkins went down and she stepped up big. I mean, I think she's led them in scoring here a lot here recently, and 18 points again last night, then 10 from Pow, Johnson, and Kitts. Like, pretty good night overall for South Carolina. They found a way to get a win.
Yeah, look, Joyce Edwards playing 29 minutes off the bench. They needed to get more out of her when Ashlyn Watkins went down. And as you just pointed out, they certainly have been. She's the next one. Dawn always seems to have the next one, especially in the post. I mean, post player after post player after post player end up being an All-American, and then they head off to the WNBA. She's going to be the next one. Her last 4 games, 21 points, 17 points, 14 points, and then last night 18 points. I do think Coach Staley would like to see her, a little bit in better position, or maybe a little bit more aggressive, if you will, off the boards. She's shooting at an incredibly high clip on the season, almost 60%, averaging 12 points per game and 5 rebounds, 75% from the charity strike. I mean, she's growing up before your eyes. We knew the talent coming in, Alex, but she's growing up before everybody's eyes, and she's going to end up being the next one.
Yeah, I think, everybody saw what she did in high school, and she was awesome in high school. And I think it was just maybe a little bit of having to transition to get used to the, college level game. And I think playing that non-conference schedule they did has only helped her prepare for this SEC slate. And, you think about all the teams they played there in non-conference slate, having to go to UCLA and play one of the top teams in the country and playing multiple top teams in the country in the non-conference. Not only help Joyce Edwards, but the rest of the team, get ready for this SEC slate. And she continues to shine, and I think you're seeing the potential she has. And she, as you mentioned, she's only going to continue to get better.
Yeah, it did end last night. What was it? 14 straight victories in by double digits? Wasn't it 14? If 15?
Yeah,
somewhere in there. It ended the streak, though. I mean, they had it.
Yeah,
and then the streak was over. Something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, and that's like their 59th straight SEC win or something too.
I believe
somewhere.
So. Yeah. It's incredible.
Alex, one of the conversations that always comes up, and it comes up around the men's team, is Colonial Life Arena and how many people fit in there and all that stuff. I mean, when Carolina is playing really well, there's a ton of folks in there. And obviously when they're struggling, I know the students have been showing up, and hats off to them for doing so. And hats off to the administration for encouraging the students and creating, incentives and an environment for them to be there and all that type of stuff. But outside of them, it's a sparse crowd, if you will. I mean, if you play it in a gym like Auburn does, it would pretty much be full every time. But very rarely does that conversation ever get had with the women in mind. And I started thinking about this, and I'm part of that. So I kind of slapped myself over it. We can have these conversations all we want, or fans can have those conversations all they want. But when the women play in there, the place is jam-packed almost every single time. It is jam-packed. So, it's just win, and you'll create that environment too. But I felt like it was the right. I thought about this last night, and I put it down in the notes in my phone. Like, every time we have this conversation, maybe it needs to be reminded that there's 17, 18,000 in there when the ladies play each time, right?
Yeah, and it's sold out every game, and it's not only is it a ticket sold out, but there's 18,000 fans in the arena every game, and it's incredible what Dawn Staley's built. I mean every game they sell that place out, no matter who they play in the non-conference or in conference. Like, they sell that place out, and it's, when you're winning national championships and winning as much as they have, I imagine it's pretty easy to sell out the arena. And it's incredible from where Dawn Staley took over this program, and the support to now. I mean, it's pretty incredible what she's done, and
Well, they made it
it's
cool.
only continuing.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, there's celebrities and stuff that show
Yeah.
up for games, and all the football players, all the old football players are always in there. I mean, everybody wants a piece of it.
Yep.
You see those lines before they tip off. It's pretty incredible. Those lines are going to be just as long coming up this weekend, because Asia Wilson 2-2 will have that number raised, and they've got Auburn for the ball game. It's a noon tip on Sunday on the SEC network. Auburn's struggling in the SEC, just 2-6. They're 11-10 overall, and this seems to be a likely large victory for Carolina while they celebrate her and honor her. After that, they go to Georgia, and then I'll tell you what, man. I know that they beat the Longhorns by 17 at home, but that trip to number 5 Texas next Sunday, the 9th, Super Bowl Sunday. That's kind of they played a big game last year on Super Bowl Sunday too, if I remember correctly. It was in the middle of the afternoon, which was great, because I don't know about you, dude, but the Super Bowl coverage from like 9 in the morning until 6 at night is just too much for me. I can't do it all day. And so it was a nice little breakup in the action, if you will, to be able to watch them play. But that trip to Austin certainly looms large, and then they've got UConn. Remember, they'll come in on the 16th. So some big games left for the ladies. And for the men, they've got every game's a big game from here on out, especially when you have it 1-1 in the SEC. And tonight they're going to try to do it for the first time in Stegman Coliseum. Alex, they're 12 points, 4 wins away from easily, being very settled in the tournament right now. You'd be talking about victories at Vanderbilt, top 5 victories at home over Auburn and Florida. And they lost those 2 games by a total of 4 points. And then the overtime loss this past weekend to Mississippi State that they lost by 5. All of these turnovers have affected them. And had they had just a couple less here and there, and I think Mike gave the stat yesterday, the last 4 games, 76 turnovers for South Carolina or something like that. It's terrible. It's a terrible number. Had they been able to win those games like they did for the large majority of them last year, you're talking about a team that is in the dance today, in the tournament, easily in the tournament. As one of the SEC's projected to get 13 teams in right now. They would absolutely, no doubt about it, be one of those 13. But because of those miscues, they're not sniffing any tournament right now. What is the pulse of the team heading into tonight's road contest?
Every time they have one of these tough losses, you're always looking at that next game. Like, all right, how's this team going to come out? And every game, pretty much, they've come out and competed. I mean, these top 5 matchups, they could have easily gotten run out the gym. If they led the game before and beat them twice, but it hasn't happened. And I think that, for one, it's a credit to the team to continue to keep playing when things aren't going your way and you've been so close. But at the same time, they've got some of these little things they've got to get cleaned up if they want to get some of these things going. I mean, some late game situations have not gone their way that they need to improve on. And the turnovers, I mean, you mentioned that those continue. They have to stop. I mean, I think they had 19 against Mississippi State. And I think it's just some late game stuff they're not executing. When you think about the Mississippi State game, they get it. They found a way to claw back. That 1-3-1 zone against Mississippi State really affected them. And, they found a way to continue to get back in that game and force overtime. And then you get to Mississippi State, or you get to overtime, and Mississippi State hits 8 of 9 from the free throw line. And that's just some execution things, and credit to Mississippi State for doing that. And South Carolina just couldn't do enough offensively there. And I think it's just one of those where they're right there, and they can fix a few things. They can get some wins here down the stretch. And, we'll see what they do tonight against Georgia. Georgia is coming into this game on a 4-game losing streak, so they're going to be, hungry for a win. So it's it's going to be a battle. It's a battle every night, but it's going to be a battle again tonight in Athens.
Yeah, that's a great point. Georgia's had issues of their own. It's not been an easy stretch they had to go to 6th-ranked Tennessee and they lost. They hosted Auburn and they almost clipped them, just like the Gamecocks did in the CLA, but they lost that game 70-68. They had to go to Arkansas, and John Calipari got his first win as a head coach of the Razorbacks in that ball game, but they lost by just 3. And then just this past weekend, they went down to the Swamp. And I guess maybe the hangover of back-to-back heartbreaking losses was kind of lingering because Florida throttled them 89-59. They beat them by 30 points at the O'Connell Center. So, Mike White's been around a while. He's got a lot of history against South Carolina, clearly. This seems like the opportunity for a get-right game for the Dogs because their next trip this weekend is to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. And they're sitting here now at 2-5 in the SEC and 14-6. And, they're in the mix for an NCAA tournament berth. But, you keep losing games and you're running out of room. So they got to have this one. So I would anticipate Georgia is going to throw everything they've got at South Carolina tonight. The thing with the Gamecocks, turnovers clearly. We know what their personnel is, and it is what it is. But, breaking the press has been really, really wild to watch. I don't know what the answer is there.
Yeah.
I mean, and then, on the other side of that conversation is defensively. They kind of went back to that 1-3-1 a little bit this weekend, and that seemed to work. You haven't seen it as often this year as you felt like you saw it last year. Do you think that's something we're going to see a little bit more of?
Yeah, I'm interested to see tonight if that is the case because that 1-3-1 is kind of what got them back into that game against Mississippi State. And you mentioned it last year, they went into that a lot, that 1-3-1, and it helped them either, extend their lead or maybe call it back into a game. So I'm interested to see if that does happen, especially now with some of the depth coming back. I mean, you had Murray Bulls never was out, but you had him listed as questionable before the last game. He's obviously playing tonight, and then Jamari Thomas is back. So I wonder now with a little bit more depth that they'll throw that in there. I think now, Georgia's probably fully going to prepare for that because they've seen it on film. And, with your point to the full court press, they handled it. Mississippi State threw it down a little bit in this last game. They handled it a little bit better with Jamari Thomas back, but it still was not clean. And, that press was what got them in that Florida game. They couldn't inbound the ball, and that was a struggle and what got Florida the win pretty much in that game. So, it's just pretty much just a ball handling and a turnovers. They just got to be cleaner there if they want to, because in this league, if you can't do that, it's going to be a long game, especially on the road.
Yeah, it is. We'll see what happens in the ball game tonight, but Carolina in desperate need of a win. It's a 7:00 tip, and Derek and Casey will be on the air at 6:30 for the pregame show. You can watch it on the SEC network, and if you do what I do, you can watch it and listen to it. For what it's worth, on the call tonight, Rich Hollenberg has the play-by-play, and Damian Fishback is the analyst on TV. Switching to football here, Alex, 9 now former players are in all-star games this week, starting Thursday night. So we're just a couple of days away at AT&T Stadium, or Jerry World, in Arlington. It's the East-West Shrine Bowl game. The East team has 5 former Carolina football players: O.D. Fortune, Tonka Hemingway, Kai Kroger, Rocket Sanders, and Josh Simon. Bam Martin Scott, because he has now decided to move on to the NFL, is also playing, but he's going to be on the West team. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to play with his guys. Of those players, and we'll get to the others coming up here in just a minute. Of those guys there, who has the most to gain on Thursday night in the East-West game?
I think you can make a case for really almost every one of them, but I think Bam Martin Scott could be one. I think he's one that's known in the draft circles now, and especially with his, putting his name into the drafts. I think he could be one that could maybe sneak into the draft. I think when you think about it, O'Donnell Fortune's going to get drafted. I think he's got a really good shot to do it. Tonka's going to get drafted. Kai Kroger, I think, could sneak in. He's probably going to be one of the top punters in the draft, and that's a spot where they normally obviously take late in the drafts, and maybe he can get in, but at the very least, he's going to get an NFL shot. And Rocket Sanders, I think, is really interesting too, because you look at how the NFL kind of treats running backs now in the draft. Like, he could maybe sneak his way into a third round, but I could see him being a fourth or fifth round guy right now. And it really Josh Simon too. Like, he's got a chance. Like, he kind of looks like that prototypical NFL tight end. And so I think each one of these guys has something to gain, but I'm really interested to see, what people are saying about Bam Martin Scott. Some of the draft analysts and all that are saying about him after this game when they get eyes on him.
So I'm going to be on the very optimistic side of this here. I think all of those guys I just listed, I think they all get drafted.
I can see it.
I really do. I think they all get drafted. I think they all deserve to get drafted. That's not just because they put the South Carolina uniform on. I think all of those guys deserve to be drafted. I think O'Donnell Fortune has the most to gain in this game, because if you think about, and look, you've got Pro Day coming up here in a couple of months too at Williams-Brice Stadium. This will be one of the more fascinating. You'll get to cover this. This is going to be the best one you've had a chance to cover. I can almost guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many guys who are projected to go in the draft, and so many guys who are going to have a chance to really move their way up. Tonka he's on a lot of boards. Kai Kroger is on a lot of boards. He's one of the best punters in the country. You already mentioned Rocket. Even if Rocket doesn't get drafted, he's going to sign. And same thing with Josh Simon. Bam Martin Scott has everything you want from an NFL standpoint and what they're looking for as far as a linebacker goes, right? From a physical standpoint. But the one name every time members of the secondary get brought up in the draft and all these things that just continuously gets forgotten about is O'Donnell Fortune. And, he's had some enormous plays in his time at South Carolina, as we all well know. And the one that always stands out is the 100-yard pick six against Notre Dame, Alex. But one of the things that also kind of gets forgotten about is a little bit of a similarity there to some of his predecessors. And the fact that they didn't throw the football to his side of the field a lot. And, occasionally, there's going to be one or two that he gets beat on. It's life. It's going to happen. But you take that with the fact that I go back 2 years, and where was he then? And where is he now? And like every time it's time for O'Donnell Fortune to take another step, he takes it every single time, and it's a big one. And so I think when I don't really know him, had spent some time around him. What an awesome kid, the pride of Sumter, South Carolina. But when he's challenged, like when he knows they're paying attention, this guy up here, he's one of the best, and I get to cover. He rises to the challenge seemingly every time. It's his makeup and his personality. So I think the fact that there are going to be scouts who get to talk to him this week and already have talked to him, and then he gets to go out there and play. I think if he has a big game on Thursday night, he doesn't have to have like a big pick or anything like that, but if he plays well, Alex, I think his name is going to start coming up a little bit more. And then when we get to Pro Day in a couple of months, he's going to have a chance to really bust through them.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was one. He's going to obviously have a lot of odds on him in this game, but he also played in the Hula Bowl, I think, here 2 weeks ago. So he's already got some NFL draft scouts and watching him. And obviously, he's going to play in the compete in the Pro Day, and maybe I think he's got a pretty good shot to be in the combine as well. So when you look at him, he was a guy who every year he was outside, kind of continued to get better and better. And then this year was kind of, his big year from an NFL standpoint, because he was going to take over that number one cornerback spot when Marcellus Dahl went and got drafted by the Patriots. And, he didn't have as many pass breakups this year, but I think that's because teams didn't really challenge him because he was so good out there covering the number one guys for the most part. And, he had a rock solid year, a really good year. And I think it was a huge year from him from an NFL standpoint. And I think I 100% agree with you. Like, he's going to be a guy who, absolutely, I think, with a big week at the West Shrine Bowl, not only the game, but these practices. With these things, the practices really are the biggest things that these scouts are watching for, because they get to see them maybe 3 or 4 times during the week. And, with a big week in the practice and a good performance in the game, I think he could continue to rise up the NFL draft boards.
It's an 8 o'clock kick on Thursday night on the NFL Network. Saturday at 2:30 on the NFL Network is the 12th annual Reese's Senior Bowl. And you got Kyle Kennard, Demetrius Knight, and TJ Sanders. Who has the most draft stock to game of those three?
Demetrius Knight. Yeah, I think when you look at the other two, Kennard and Sanders, like those guys are probably going to be at least second round picks. I think TJ probably has the best chance to potentially move into that first round, talk. But Demetrius Knight's a guy who I think maybe is a little under the radar. And I mentioned it, I think I posted on the board last week that I mentioned to see what NFL draft people are saying about him at the Reese's Senior Bowl. Because when you look at it, I think he's got everything the NFL draft wants. I mean, you think about his mentality, you think about on the field, you think about his speed at the linebacker spot, his physicality. He's got it all, and I think I'm not sure about this linebacker class, but I think it's I think in this one he's got a chance to be one, maybe a top 5 linebacker taken in this draft, and I think
Ooh.
Reese's Senior Bowl, I think is the chance where he could be, rise up those boards. And I think Pro Football Focus, I think mentioned him last week as I think they may be on their big board right now, have him as like one of the top linebackers being selected right now. So I think he's got a chance to continue rising the board, and I'm really interested to see what people are saying about him this week.
I am too. Those other guys, look, I totally agree with you. TJ Sanders, Kyle Kennard, we know that they're going to go in the draft. It's really a matter of how high. Demetrius Knight, while we're talking about his play, when he sits in the interview room, that's where he shines as much as you sat in an interview room with him.
Yeah.
He's very impressive. He already has the NFL mindset. He's got a family. He needs to provide for his family. He's responsible. He's a teammate. He's a team player. His response to why he played in the bowl game. All these things matter to those guys. He's very, very, very mature. He's an adult. And when he sits in that room, Alex, there's going to be somebody, my projection, somebody out there, one of these teams in the NFL is going to take him over somebody else they were planning to take just because of his makeup.
Yeah, I think you mentioned his interview with these teams and that he's going to do with all throughout the recent Senior Bowl. He's going to nail those. Like he will be awesome in those interviews. I mean, we've seen what he can say, what he says in the press conference, and his maturity. Like I think he will be awesome in the interview rooms, and his play on the field is only going to help him take him to that next level as well.
I agree. What about Eamon Warry? Where's he? What's he doing?
I thought I kind of figured he'd be in the Reese's Senior Bowl, but I don't think he is. And I mean, I think he's a guy who, he's one that when he goes to the combine and in these pro days, he's going to, I think, shoot up draft boards just because of his athleticism. And I think he put a lot on tape this year from an NFL draft standpoint. And I think he's probably got the best chance to be the Gamecocks' first or the top draft pick, because I think he'll just go to these combines and, light it up with his athleticism and his 40 and his, broad jump and all that. I think he will be awesome in those combines. And in my opinion, he's got the best chance to be the highest draft pick for South Carolina.
He continues to move up. He's inside the top 20 by many right now.
Yeah.
Alex, we got to let you run on that note. Brad Crawford's coming up here in just a moment. Any parting shots?
Heading to Athens tonight, so stay tuned to the Big Spur. I'll be in Stegman Coliseum tonight covering the game, and then Matt Aronson and I will be back tomorrow night. We'll recap the game on the Chief Sports Network on the late night Gamecock show, but we'll have it all covered.
Make sure you wear something waterproof. They'll pee on your leg over there.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Safe travels, brother. Thank you.
See ya.